Hello and welcome to another episode of Rustacean Station. I am your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with, again, we said Emil. Many different ways to say your name.
Perfect.
And you'll say your own last name for me because it's way out there for me. He is the creator of egui and a very friendly guy and a guy who's very difficult to get a hold of. But when he wants to get a hold of you, he can definitely find you, right? So it's an interesting story about how we actually got talking. But anyways, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Why don't you say your full name for us?
Okay, I'm Emil Ernerfeldt, but you just call me Emil. I'm not going to hold you to pronounce my weird Swedish name. It's a weird name even in Sweden.
Even in Sweden, it's a weird name.
Like, we're 20 people called Ernerfeldt. It was my grandfather and his cousins that came up with the name. So
they just made up their own surname?
Well, my grandfather's father was called Ernst, and they wanted to create a surname honoring his name after he died. And the best thing they could do was Ernerfeldt. That's how the story goes.
Interesting. Okay. I hear a lot of hyphenated names. I don't think I hear a lot of people kind of saying, I want to honor my relative and change my surname. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of rare. Yeah.
But yeah, why don't we kind of talk a little bit more about your background, right? Because I know you definitely were. So maybe we'll just kind of talk a little bit about, I did see you post on Reddit. I messaged you, you replied back, and then I asked you, do you want to come on the show? And then you disappeared. It's okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to the next part, which is somebody. So if you guys are ever interested, there is a Discord for this podcast. I don't know how to actually get to it, but anyways, there's a Discord for this podcast. Check it out. Join it if you want to, guys. Go on chat if you want to come on the show, etc. Anyways, somebody asked for me to bring you on the show, and I replied back, "Oh, I did. I tried to ask him, but he disappeared. So maybe he doesn't want to come on." Because there is some people that do that, and that's okay. And then all of a sudden, you messaged me directly, I think, right?
Yeah. No, someone saw that on your Discord, I guess, or probably the person who reminded you, and it's like, hey, he said he already asked you, and like, what? Where? And I checked my Twitter DMs, I checked my Discord, I checked my emails. Like, no, he hasn't. I don't know. I'm not that much in like a big Reddit user, so I think I just missed your message there, and I'm really sorry for it because I'm a fan of your podcast, and I'm really happy to be on here.
Oh, it's glad to hear that you're a fan because I'm a fan of your work, man. I like that's the one thing. Like I've been super into GUIs because, like, I don't know. I mean, that's the stuff that people play with, right? You can't do console apps all your whole life, and I've been trying to follow. Well, before I was following the Are We GUI Yet .rs and. And I'm trying to figure out like what would be a good GUI. Like if I were to do 100% Rust 100% Rust program and make a GUI out of it, what would I use? 60 FPS is interesting. The Slint. eGUI is also extremely interesting. The demo that you guys have is pretty cool. Tori is interesting, but I think a little bit. That one's actually running some kind of HTML thing, I think, too, right? It's quite different.
Yeah, I think it's like an electron killer.
Yeah. ICE is also interesting to me because I do love Elm. I really love Elm. I'm a functional programming kind of guy, and I played with Elm before, which is quite interesting. I don't know. There isn't anybody who's really like sticking out, but I think eGUI is something that's super interesting. And then also IMGUI, right? Or is that IMGUI? I don't know how you say that. IMGUI.
Yeah.
But that one is a mix of Rust and C, right?
Yeah, it's a wrapper around the C++ library called Dear IMGUI. Everyone just called it IMGUI, but yeah. It's a very popular C++ library, and it was the main inspiration for eGUI. So I mean, maybe I should just start there. So
why don't we start before that? Why don't we start like,
okay.
Who are you? How'd you get into programming to begin with? Why don't we start from there and work our way up? I think it must be something interesting in there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm from Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, and I think I was about 15 when I fell in love with programming. I had like a course in C++ at I guess Swedish high school, and it was like love at first sight because I could build things with my fingers, with my fingertips, using math. Like this is for me. So I
have to ask, you're in Stockholm, Sweden, but you don't do Erlang, is that right?
Yeah,
Erlang is very huge in Stockholm, right?
Well, I guess. I mean, it has Swedish roots for sure. Like it's from the company Ericsson, Swedish company. But no, for me it was C++, and I really wanted to get into games. like very quickly because I love visual things. Like I want to program visual things, like a lot of people, right? So I studied computing science for 5 years here in Sweden, north of Sweden. And then I did this 2D physics sandbox thing as my master thesis. And I worked with, that's called Fun, Phun. And that took off a lot, actually. It's a fun physics sandbox where you can, draw shapes and just make them come alive. And it kind of went viral. So that became my job for the next 5 years, building that. So it's kind of building a 2D game engine, basically. It was really fun, but I moved around in a lot of different areas. Like I worked at another, like 2 game companies here in Stockholm, Arrowhead and Embark Game Studios. I worked with 3D scanning, which was really cool, like doing like low level or different, doing like 3D reconstructions from point clouds, really fun stuff. I also worked with cybersecurity before. So I've done a lot of different things, but what I really love is, 3D visual programming things. So it was actually what like from the game programming that I got into immediate mode GUIs, which is, the thing that I love now and put into egui. So maybe I can get back a bit later to what that is, but I guess that's like the short whirlwind tour of who I am. I mostly my career has been C++, but 2014 I found out about Rust for the first time, and like most people, got a bit scared of it first. Especially back in 2014, was really weird programming language. It has like the ampersand for I think it was reference counted pointers, and it had like the tilde for garbage collected pointers and stuff like that. But after a couple of years, it started to settle down into something more sane. And yeah, for me, I like Rust is really the future now. I can never see myself go back to C++ now. So I found this when I was programming games. I found this great library, Dear Imgui, which is like the simplest way to write a GUI in C++. And it's so much simpler than anything else that it's just hard not to love it. And it's really big in the games communities. Like it's built by a person who works in the games community, and it's built a lot for game engines. And it's really the main inspiration for egui. And so it's worth talking about it alone because it's kind of a new paradigm in GUI frameworks. So I've written GUIs before from scratch. I've used libraries like Qt, and Java, Swing, and stuff like that back in the day as well. And they all are kind of hideous because there's so much code you need to write just to get a few buttons on the screen. And these kind of the classic GUI libraries are called retained mode GUI libraries because you create buttons, you create windows and so on. You add buttons to the window, and then that state is retained. And so if you want to remove a button, you call window.remove and give the button handle to that window and so on. So you kind of build this GUI as a state. But like 20 years ago, I think it was Casey Muratori, who's famous from Handmade Hero. Like if you have any game fans in the podcast, you may have heard of Casey Muratori. He's kind of he works in the game industry in Seattle, and he came up with this immediate mode idea for a GUI library, and it's called immediate because if you say like you make a button for your UI and it immediately gets painted and it immediately runs the logic for that button and then it vanishes. And this is the cool part of it. So you can write like if button dot clicked, then react to the button click. And what happens there is the UI code will figure out where that button should go based on the layout code. It will check if there's a click in that rectangle, and if so, return true that button was clicked. And there's nothing to be stored. There's no button to be stored because whenever you want to repaint the UI, you just run all the UI code again. So this is like an idea from game programming. Like in all games, you render everything probably 60 times per second, or wherever your display rate is. So the idea from immediate mode GUI is like, why don't we do that with all GUIs? Like, why not? And that creates a huge simplification for how to actually use a GUI library, because it gets rid of all those callbacks that you're so used to if you write GUI code, right? You add on-click handlers and everything, and then that calls some code far away, and you get a lot of tangled state or entangled state. And immediate mode just cuts that all away. And it's just a breath of fresh air. Like when I started using, so Casey Muratori, I think, invented this around 2001, 2002. There's a video of him talking about it. And a few years later, a guy called Omar, I forgot his second name, he created this Dear ImGui library in C++, which is now like the go-to library for any game studio who wants to do dev tools, but also the go-to tool for a lot of companies that just want to do dev tools in general. Like if you're a computer vision company, maybe you use Dear ImGui to create your own in-house tools, because it's really a tool that is, it's nice to build GUIs in it. Like instead of being a struggle to build a GUI, it's so easy. Like a button is one line of code. And yeah, so when I fell in love with Rust, I knew like, okay, I want this library, but for Rust, but there isn't that library for Rust, so I'll have to build it. So that's the inception of egui.
I mean, where do you even start off with something like this? I mean, it seems very complicated because you have to kind of probably first take a look around and see what, like, kind of how small does your Lego have to be, right? Because you have to really kind of start building up things. You basically start yak shaving, no?
Well, I had the inspiration from this exact 16 library theory in GUI, and I took a lot of inspiration from that, but I also struggled a lot, to adapt it to a Rust syntax. Now, luckily, I think immediate mode works really well for Rust, or rather, I should say, retain mode works really badly for Rust, because all these callbacks you're used to from GUI libraries, in Rust, they create a lot of lifetime issues. Like you have an on-click callback and you want to modify some state. Well, that callback can take a reference to that state. Well, then you have a lifetime issue, or you need to box it, put it behind a mutex or something like that. So a lot of Rust GUI libraries try to solve this in different ways. A lot of them resort to message passing. So you say, like, when you click a button, you get a message of a button click type, and then you handle that later on. But that creates a lot of say air in your code. Like you have your code for actually creating button in one place, and the code for handling the button is somewhere far below, and then the code for defining the messages passed between them is in a third place. But immediate mode, on the other hand, works really well with Rust because, well, there's no callbacks, and so there's no lifetime issues. But yeah, where do I start when I created a GUI library? Yeah, I started from the bottom up. So I knew from the very beginning I really wanted this to work on the web. Like, I think WebAssembly is one of the most exciting technologies for a long, long time. And Rust is so good for it. So I wanted to create a GUI library that worked on the web and natively. So I started with web. So I think first prototype I hacked up on a train ride. And it was painting using the 2D canvas of a web canvas. So painting text and boxes, basically using that. And then I had a small Rust program compiled to Wasm that did a logic of the GUI. So the rendering was done in JavaScript, but all the logic was in Rust. And then I started from there and started like figuring out what's a good syntax, what's a good Rusty syntax for immediate mode GUI. And then I also started shifting from this canvas rendering to WebGL rendering. So pretty quickly, egui became completely rendered using WebGL on the web. So it runs really quickly, right? And that's very important when you have an immediate mode GUI library that, renders 60 times per second if things are happening on screen. And so it needs to be really quick. It needs to be fast, like a game is fast. But so that's very important. And I think egui does a pretty good job of that. It should also be noted, the design of egui is really interesting because I've completely separated backend from the library code. So egui is a library. It actually doesn't render at all. Egui outputs triangles, and then whatever your backend is renders those triangles. So if you're running on web, those triangles are rendered using WebGL. If you run locally using the egui framework called eFrame, then it renders with OpenGL using the Glow library, really good Rust library for OpenGL bindings. But there's also plenty of integrations of egui into many other different backends, like they're for game engines like Bevy and Amnestist and Godot and so on. There's also integrations for a lot of WGPU and Volcano and other rendering backends written in Rust as well. So egui was really designed from the beginning as well to run anywhere, like super portable. So egui, the library, has no system dependencies. Like it doesn't read anything from the operating system, doesn't read any files, doesn't do any input even. Inputs are passed to it from whatever the integration is, and then it returns a bunch of triangles to show on screen. And this is taken, that design is taken directly from DRM GUI. I think it's a really interesting way to cut off your library from the rest of the app system, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just taking a look at some of the sample code you have, at least in the README, right? It looks pretty straightforward. Like, I'm surprised you don't have to wrap this thing with, wrap your variables with something to make sure that if you don't have two inputs being pushed at the same time, you won't mess something up. Like there's not this going to ever be this kind of problem.
No, this is the beauty with immediate mode. So, for instance, you can, as I said, a button is just like if UI.button, and then the text that goes on it, .clicked, and then you can write your response right there. And a text edit, you pass it, like if you want to edit some text in UI, you just pass in a mutable reference to a string, and egui will take that string, render it on screen, check if there's any keyboard inputs, and if so, edit that string, and then you pass it back to you. So that string is never stored anywhere in egui from frame to frame. It's just, everything is transient. It's immediate. Same with a slider for a value. You pass in a mutable reference to your float or your F32, whatever it is. And if the slider is being dragged, it's being modified, and then your state has been modified. But there's no syncing of state between your application state and egui state. It's just borrowed to egui and then passed straight back. This means that there can be no state clashes or state inconsistencies. So this is a classic problem of retained UIs as well, like where the application state and the front end or the UI actually get out of sync. So let's say we can come up with an example. You click the submit button and it starts changing the application state. And then that's supposed to remove some buttons from the UI and replace it with some other buttons. But you forgot to remove some of the buttons and just added some new buttons. It's something you can see this in battle design UIs where the state does not really, let's say the GUI state is not consistent with the application state. So there may be buttons that should be disabled that are not disabled, or visible that shouldn't be visible, and so on. And this gets removed in the immediate mode because there's only your app state. The UI rendering code just immediately renders what your app state looks right now. So it creates this really easy to read and write UI code. It's not without its drawbacks, by the way. Immediate mode is not perfect, but it does make it so much easier to create a UI. So that's really the goal of egui, is to be the easiest to use GUI library. Not necessarily the most powerful, but the one that is most easy to use, most easy to get started with.
Still trying to wrap my head about what exactly is immediate mode. It's a little bit difficult for me to understand.
Yeah, I understand it. This is It's very difficult it's surprisingly difficult to explain and understand. But once you
Yeah.
grok it, you're really like, oh yeah, no, I get it. So, you probably used a lot of UI libraries where you create a new button. You're like in Java, you write new button or new slider or new window, and
Yeah.
you save that handle and you add that button to your window and you save the window handle. Perhaps you save the button handle as well, so you can change the color of the button later on, for instance, or disable it later on. So so you can
Yeah.
you save the button and say that button.set enabled false or something like that later on, or set color
Okay.
red later
Yeah.
on. And that's because you retain a reference to this button that lives. It can live for several minutes or hours, depending on how long that button is displayed on your screen, right? In immediate mode, instead, you 60 times per second, you run this UI code that says, oh, how does your app look like right now? And whoever used the egui library will say, okay, this is how my app looks right now. It looks like a button. It looks like a slider. It looks like a window. And this button looks like it's red right now, or it looks like it's disabled like right now. And if ever that button changes color, well, that's because something in your application state changed color. Maybe the button is red when, let's say, you make a text input, and when the text is too long, you change a label to say, input too long, and make this text red. And instead of having a callback like on text change, set warning text red or something like that, you can just have your state be the text, and then you have a text edit that edits that text, passing the reference to it. Egui changed it, and then you just say, if text.len is greater than 32, UI.colored label red, text is too long, please make it shorter. And you show that text, right? And you don't have any callbacks or anything. You can just check, the text is too long, so show a warning text. And since this will be run 60 times a second, when the text becomes shorter again, the label will or will not be shown depending on your state. So what really is happening under the hood when you say, UI.button in egui, like to create a button, is everything that a UI would normally do, a GUI library would normally do, is done instantly within that frame. So it will, egui has a layout engine, and it will just check, okay, where does the next button go? Okay, here's the coordinates. Is there, as I said before, is there a mouse cursor above that? If it's above that, it should have the hovered look to it. So it adds some, hover effect to it. And if it's being clicked, return true from the clicked function on it. So the user knew it was clicked. And then egui outputs some shape and some text to a draw buffer to be painted later. And that's it. There's nothing stored. Like then it moves on. So the result from adding a button is just a few shapes to be drawn later, and the response object, which contains like, was it clicked, was it hovered, and so on. Does that help?
Kind of, yeah, because it sounds a lot like the way that Flutter kind of works, actually, to a certain extent.
I'm not familiar with Flutter, but it's a reactive framework, I assume.
Yeah, so the way it works that I understand is that there's actually different trees there's different trees, right? So the tree that you usually spend the most of your time with is called a widget tree. And what actually happens is like every single second, each widget has a build function that returns, more widgets, right? So like a text widget may have a bunch of stuff within it, like, because you may have bold, etc. And then it just kind of traverses all the way down and then goes back up. And then if anything changes, then there's like another thing called like a render tree or an object tree. I forgot which one goes first. And then that one will be updated to kind of match the state. And the idea is that you can just keep building your widget tree, and like it's basically stateless in the fact that you can just keep rerunning it over and over and over again. And it resonates a lot with me because when you're explaining, because like there's this idea where you can say, okay, if whatever, then like return some kind of state change, right? So you can say in the background, okay, if you click this button, then set like disabled equal to true, and then when it renders, then it's going to check to see if anything has changed. So if that went to true, then obviously there would be a change that's happening. So it sounds very similar, but I'm sure it's not the same. There's just some differences, but the way I understand it sounds very similar.
They are similar. Reactive UIs are similar to immediate mode, so they kind of sit in between retain mode and immediate mode. And I must say I'm not an expert in reactive GUIs. Should probably something I should learn more about. But as I understand it still keeps a state of your UI behind the scenes. You don't really see it, so it kind of feels like you're coding more immediately, but it still keeps a state behind the scenes. So it's kind of it's trying to get like the best of both worlds. It can get the performance of retain mode, which can be better than immediate mode, but like the sweet, like the easiness of let's say immediate mode solves kind of two things. One was the state that gets inconsistent between UI and your app state. And that's also solved by reactive GUI programming. But I think like you still have, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you still have like messages and callbacks that you need to write, right, in Flutter, or am I wrong there?
Yeah. There's like you have to pass an anonymous function or something to, like every time you say a button clicked, and then within there you'd have this thing called set state, which would then say, okay, this variable has been changed, and now you need to re-render the whole widget tree.
So you still need to do that. So immediate mode removes that callback as well, right? So there's you really say like if this button was clicked, and there's a normal if statement, like any rusty if statement, and there's no callback, which means you can reference all your state with no borrowing issues at all. And that's the big step from reactive to immediate. So our reactive kind of try to keep track of like, oh, has something changed? Then we need to re-render the UI, but otherwise stop doing that or try not to do that for as long as possible. So in reactive, like when you create a button, there is a button stored and there is a callback being called when that's being clicked. But whenever something changes, instead of like removing a button or changing the color of a button, you say, oh, just repaint everything. And it would just do your re-layout, which is so nice because, you don't get the state problems, but you still have your callbacks. So it's kind of like an in-between between classic retain mode, Java Swing, GUI programming, and immediate mode. And I think it's a really good progression in GUI programming, React and reactive programming. But it's not quite the same as immediate. And I think immediate has some benefits and some drawbacks, right? I don't think there's one mode of GUI programming that is the best. I think some are best for your purposes and some are worse for your purposes, right? So immediate mode is really good for keeping code very short and simple. Like there's no, as I said, no callbacks and so on. But it also has drawbacks, and most severe drawback is layout. So because everything needs to be painted right away, like when you say UI.button or UI.label or whatever, that button is painted right there, right then. It means it's very hard to do complex layouts where you have like several buttons that are centered into a parent layout, because you need to know the sizes of the child to be able to center it in the parent. And if you think about, like say you have two buttons next to each other, and you need to position those two buttons based on the size of those two buttons together. Well, in immediate mode, when you paint the first button, you must need to know where that first button goes right away, immediately. But if that depends on the size of the button coming after it, well, you're screwed because you haven't gotten to that button yet. Like there are some ways to solve that, but they are all kind of ugly or ugly-ish hacks around that. You can save the size of the button from the previous frame. You can do a 2-pass immediate mode where you like run your UI code twice each frame. That solves some of these problems and so on. But fundamentally, layout is harder with immediate mode. And that's simply because like in retained or reactive mode, you create this tree or your widget tree. And then once you've made that widget tree, you do the layout of it. You figure out where everything goes. And once you figured out where everything goes, it's easy to check like, okay, where is the click? But that's why you have to need a callback, right? Because after you do the layout, you first add all your widgets, you do the layout, figure out where they are, you check for a click on it. And now you need to do a callback to do that click. But in immediate mode, since you don't create a tree and then lay it out, you lay out immediately. That's how you can get away with having no callback. You can just check, was this button clicked while you created the button? So the act of creation is the act of layout at the same time in immediate mode. It just puts those together, which removes the whole need of callbacks. So the benefit is a lot shorter, easier code, drawback, worse layouts. So it depends on your like what you prioritize. If you prioritize like just creating a GUI quickly because you want a GUI, then I would go with immediate mode. I would suggest egui if you're coding Rust, of course. If you want something that is really like have nice flexible layouts and so on, and that it looks more professional and can be more, more flexible, then I probably would recommend not using egui. At least not yet. I'm working on. Hopefully, I'll be able to work on what's called multipass immediate mode later on, where you actually run, as I said before, run your UI code several times, and that can solve some of these layouting things. But for now, it's more like easy to use but slightly less powerful, and I think that's a worth trade-off in many circumstances.
Yeah, okay. I can understand a little bit more. It takes me a moment to kind of think about this. Like, because I know that the way the layouts work with Flutter is that the parent will tell the child, hey, this is your constraints. And then once you hit the bottom and start traversing back up, then the child would say, okay, based on the constraints that you told me, this is my size. This is how you draw me. And so that's how I can do a very quick one through pass, go up and then go back down, and then everything gets drawn.
Yep.
But with IamGUI, there's basically just one pass down and then you're done.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like straight. It's like zero pass. As soon as you when you create a button, it's the parent says the constraints or where it can be, and then the button picks the place right there, right then. It doesn't wait for child widgets. Like more importantly, perhaps if you add a panel into a window and that panel has some sub widgets in Flutter, you probably add a panel, you add all the child widgets, then the layout pass will return with the sizes of all the child widgets. And so the panel knows its size and how it can position itself based on the size of the children. But in immediate mode, again, you need to immediately position that panel before you even know how many children is in that panel or what their sizes are. Now there's some hacks, or there's some circumstances where that doesn't matter. Like if it's a panel that doesn't react to clicks or anything, you can just wait for the children to paint, and then you know what to paint that panel. So it's surprisingly often not a problem, but it's still a problem sometimes. So I also see egui like an experiment. So Dear Ingui, the library that inspired it, as I said, it was really created for like dev tools, especially for games. Now, I wanted to see if I could take immediate mode and make it more than just for dev tools, like make something that looks more professional, that feels more professional, that has better layouts, and can actually be used for real apps. And so that was my focus from the beginning as well, not to just make this for games, but to make this like a good candidate for web apps. And so I'm really happy that there are actually companies starting to using egui for their apps. And but I still see the experiment. Like I don't know if this is viable in the long run. I do believe it's going to be viable, but it's new, right? Like this, I really feel like this is an interesting avenue to explore, and I want to explore it.
Yeah, I'm just still trying to wrap my head around. I mean, I got a good grasp of egui, right, and immediate mode, but I'm just thinking like this would mean that you're unable to resize the window, right? Whatever you put into it, it just gets rendered. Or am I understanding wrong? Because if you try to resize the window, that has to be something more reactive, no?
No, that's no problem at all. Yeah, no, that's no problem at all. In fact, like immediate mode can be very, very dynamic because since everything is by default rendered, let's say 60 times per second or the display rate. As soon as you resize a window, everything is just repainted. So all the UI code is being run and it says like, oh, the window is different size. Well, adjust my layout and position based on that. So if you go to the web demo of egui, egui.rs, you can see like you can click on windows, you can resize things, you can everything is very dynamic, very alive. So that's not a problem actually.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, okay, let's see.
It's more like when you have complex layout where you have, like where you have a drawback is when you have, like say a panel with a bunch of buttons in it, and you want the position of the panel to be centered within some larger window or something. And so you need to lay out the buttons within the panel to know how big the panel is. And once you know the big panel is, then you can center it, right? You need to know the size of something to know where to center it. And when you have a retained or reactive programming GUI, you can do this layout pass where you figure out where the size of all the children are, and then you can position the parents based on the size of the children. In immediate mode, you just don't have that because everything is, again, immediately positioned and placed.
Okay.
But
You're supposed to be running, sorry, I was just saying, if you're supposed to be running 60 frames per second, how come when I put the demo into continuous on web, I only get 30? Is that a problem of something else?
That's maybe that you just have a 30 hertz monitor then, I guess. So, on my 60 hertz monitor, I got 60 hertz. On my 100 hertz monitor, I got 100 hertz. So it could also depend on your browser. I don't know. It should be your display refresh rate.
Really? Okay.
It's good that you brought up, by the way, continuous mode, because the egui framework, eFrame, by default uses what I call reactive mode, which is not reactive GUI, but it's reactive in that it's only repaints when there's new input. And this is just to save CPU. So like if your GUI is static and not showing any difference, it won't be repainting unless you're starting moving your cursor above it, and then it starts repainting.
Yeah, I noticed that one. It's really weird, actually. So if I close, not quite. If I make the window smaller, it actually goes up to 60 frames per second, or at least it did for a moment.
What browser are you using?
Chrome. So if I make the window smaller, it goes up to 60 frames. But if I make it bigger, wider at least, it goes down to 30. Sometimes, not really consistent.
I know there's some problems with some browsers, especially Firefox on Mac and Linux. Since egui renders to a WebGL canvas on web. On Firefox, that WebGL canvas is actually copied from the GPU back to the CPU to do compositioning in the browser, which adds a lot of latency whenever you have like a big WebGL canvas in Firefox on Mac and Linux. So Firefox has performance issues when you have a huge WebGL canvas like egui has. And that's a shame. It's hard for me to fix. And maybe, I don't know, Chrome has a similar problem then, I guess. I don't use Chrome myself.
Okay.
But I've used Chromium browsers like Brave, and it's usually a good FPS there. But
I'm not too sure.
Maybe file an issue, and I'll see if I can fix it later.
I'm gonna treat this as what is that word again? It's like you hear somebody shouting for help, but then you're like, well, somebody else probably heard that, so I'm just gonna walk away.
That's interesting.
There's a word for that. Yeah, there's a word for that. No, I know. I don't even know how to even describe that issue. Maybe I feel like maybe it's my browser, or maybe it's my window. Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. I can try to describe it for you, but okay. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it would be, so you have a couple of different themes, right? You can't make your own theme yet, right?
Yes, you can. So
you can.
Yeah, so there's a lot of users who just change the theme of egui radically, make it look very different. So in the egui.rs webpage, if you go into the backend panel, there is a settings thing there. Then you can go in and just change the style of everything. It changes text size, text color, how rounded the corners are, all the colors everywhere, and so on. So you can actually change the look of it quite detailed. But by default, I just ship a light and dark mode, which looks similar to each other, just light and dark.
So, but you imagine this one is actually more for development, or it could actually be for kind of client side apps. It kind of depends on you, right? If you want people to see this kind of style.
Yeah. So I think it's for dev apps, like for dev tools. I think egui is kind of a much better choice than other non-immediate mode libraries, because it's so much easier to just write something. Like, you get productive much quicker. Now, it may not look as good, but that doesn't really matter for dev tools normally, right? But I think also for a lot of type of applications, especially interactive applications, we do a lot of 3D things. Like I know there's a company doing a CAD tool, professional CAD tool, using egui, and for those sort of things, I think it fits really well as well. Like when you have a lot of dynamicism, things move, and so you still really render everything 6 times per second. You still want 3D things, so you still want a WebGL canvas and so on. I think egui is a really good fit. And so I'm actually going to be using egui for my own company. So me and 2 friends of mine co-founded a company last month called Rerun.io, and we're going to be doing 3D and 2D visualization as a dev tool for people working in computer vision and different perception-heavy things like robotics and machine learning and so on, where you need to visualize things easily. And so that's the idea of our company. Like you would log text in your application, but now you can log images and point clouds and depth images and meshes and so on. And that will then show up in a web viewer code made in egui. So that's we the 3 of us worked with like 3D scanning before. And so we built this like in-house dev tools before, where it's really useful to be able to visualize things quickly. And back then we coded in C++, and so we used theory GUI. But we think this could be really a product for a lot of companies. So we want to create a tool that any developer working in this field could easily use to visualize things. And we want this to be powered by Rust. And we're going to build it with egui as well. And so, I think it's going to be an interesting experience, because I'm going to be doing a lot of dog fooding, like using egui and like putting my money where my mouth is, saying like, yeah, egui is great, and now I'm going to actually build a company on it. But I think it's going to be a good fit, because like developer productivity is very important, right? And that's why I think like building a GUI library that is easy to use is actually really, really important. So that's why that's one of the reasons we're going to use it at Rerun. There's also like, I think it's worth talking about as well, like starting a company that uses Rust. Because I worked at 2 companies now that have been Rust jobs. My previous 2 jobs, one place called Distill Networks and one Embark Game Studios. And we were using Rust for everything. And there's so many benefits to using Rust compared to C++. Now, of course, you run a Rust podcast. I don't need to tell you why Rust is great, but there's so many things, subtle things that people I don't think appreciate. One of the things is like, if you have a lot of programmers who are not so experienced, using Rust is great, because you have all these safeguards, right? It's very hard to create a seg fault compared to C++. So that's a huge benefit. But hiring is also a huge benefit. Like if you say you're hiring Rust developers, you're going to find some really good developers. That's my experience working at the other Rust companies, because there's a lot of people using C or C++ at work who wish they were using Rust and would jump ship to another company if they could just work with Rust. I've done that. I know a lot of people have done that, who are just willing to jump to another company, probably take a cut in salary as well, just to be able to work with their favorite programming language. And those kind of people who really love Rust are also usually very good programmers, in my experience. Like Rust is difficult to learn, right? But it also means that Rust developers, on average, I think, are a lot like a really good programmers. So I see it as a benefit to our company to be using Rust. Now we haven't started hiring yet, so maybe I'll shut up when I start struggling with that. But that's my hope anyway.
So the other thing I would say too, as somebody who actually does hiring, I kind of think it's better to choose one of these niche languages because the pool is smaller, because it's similar to what it's really similar thinking as what you're talking about. But for me, it's like there's so many people who just say, okay, what's the hottest language right now because I want to get a job, right? Okay, PHP, Java, JavaScript, something like that. If you say Rust, like in comparison, it's so small. So like the people who actually focus on Rust or these other kind of niche languages care a lot about, working in the right language that they think is right for them. And they're actually going to care about actually to learn the language as opposed to people who just choose a language so they can get a job. They're just going to learn enough that they can kind of get through and then make money.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience is that people are like that and that's fine. That's the way that they work. But as somebody who's hiring, I mean, that's not what I want. I don't want somebody who's just going to choose a language because it's easy for them to find a job. Like you want to find somebody who actually cares what the hell they're doing,
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great point. I think it's also kind of ironic because I've heard from C++ programmers that say that Rust is difficult. And I mean, I was a C++ programmer. I was using C++ primarily for 15 years, and I loved C++. I think still think it's a great language, but it's extremely big language. It's extremely complicated and complex. The only thing is you have to keep that complexity in your own head instead of having a compiler telling you when you're doing something wrong. So like a lot of people have made this point before me, but C++ have lifetime issues as well. It just doesn't tell you about them. You just need to keep them in your head, while Rust does that bookkeeping for you. So I think once you start realizing that the borrow checker is your friend, Rust is actually an easier language than C++. But yeah, that's my tangent. I think I don't know where I was going there.
Are you really ready to bet your company on the stuff you're working on? And you have that much confidence in it, or are you kind of just like, well, maybe it'll harden up the proc a bit, or what's your thought process about this?
Well, first of all, betting on Rust, I don't think is a bet at all. Rust is gonna eat C++ lunch eventually. Like C++ has a lot of baggage and a lot of legacy that's gonna take a while and so on. But you're talking about egui, I assume, and we're gonna, egui is gonna be the front end part of it, and I think having an in-house tool like egui is always a benefit. Whenever I worked, if we can build it in-house, usually I find it's better, or have something that we have control of in-house, because the speed that you can iterate and work on that thing is so much higher. So using egui for me, I think it's great because I created it, right? So whenever I find a pain point, I can fix it. Now, there's gonna come places where I want to go, oh shit, why did I design it like that? That was a bad idea, and that happens, quite often. Then I'll have to fix it, right? But that's also gonna benefit everyone, every other egui user as well. But also, I'm gonna benefit from everyone making pull requests to egui. So egui is actually really has a booming developer contribution list, right? We have over 100 people contributing to it, and so I get the benefit from everyone else as well. So for me, I think it's a good bet to use egui for our tools. But yeah, time will tell, right? Maybe wrong.
I would say it's a pretty positive attitude, but I'm just thinking when you make your own thing, you don't think it's that great. When you use somebody else's, you usually put a higher okay, this is pretty decent, right? Especially if you see a lot of people when you know how it's made, right? The digital glue and popsicle sticks putting it together. And it's just wow, I can't believe people actually find this thing useful. It's just this and this and this. Yeah, I mean that's my only meaning. It's no way to say that egui is not good, but it's just
no, you're not wrong.
You make it yourself. It's just this is not that great, guys. Come on, it's just this and this, and
I've seen exactly. I've seen the Sausage Factory, and you're not wrong, but I also, that's what I love about open source as well. You can look at the source code of basically any Rust library out there, uh, which is super good, and you realize, well, it's all built by people like me, right? And some of them are really clean, and some of them are kind of messy, right? And I don't think I think it's a mistake to think that you cannot build things as good as others. Like I see a lot of people have that attitude, like, no, let's not invent it here. Let's use someone else's tool instead. They just assume it's going to be better because they just look at the API, right? You just look at the API and you don't look at the source code behind it, and you just assume that everything below the API is super well thought out and it's all rainbows and sunshine underneath. But on your own project, as you said, like how messy it is underneath. But truth is, everything is messy in our industry. Like all the source code is messy. That's the dirty secret of our industry, right? We have pretty interfaces with messy undersides, underbellies. So for me, it's more like the more important part is having something that is flexible, something that you can change quickly, something that you have control over. That's for me is a more motivating thing. So wherever I worked, I always struggled. I've pushed for having in-house tools and so on because it's just more productive.
Yeah, for me, I have a hard time to do that, to put that. Like I was in a team where we actually had like the manager actually wrote like the Mongo database driver.
Mm-hmm.
There was always a problem with it. So that's why I was like, well, why the hell are we using this? And like, okay, sure, it's nice to have the guy on here, but the problem is that this guy doesn't really know what he's doing, and I have no idea why the hell he wrote his own driver. Like, I'm sure somebody wrote a driver in Java for MongoDB, so why the hell do we have to use his? There's always a problem.
Well, I'm also always going to protect against that, right? So like I'm going to use egui for the GUI, but everything else is going to be different, right? Like I'm not going to use egui for any. I'm going to use someone else's library for do 3D visualization, for instance. I'm not going to build that from scratch. I'm not going to build a transport layer from scratch and so on. I'm not saying like everything should be built from scratch. And I can really see myself like maybe 2 years down the road, we're going to swap out egui for let's say iced or something else because it's matured quicker because they put more time into it or something like that. That could very well happen. But I don't think that's a big problem as long as you prepare for that. Like, this component of a product may change in the future. That again, like, I think one of the most important things as we can do as developers is make write code that is easy to change, code that is easy to refactor, so that you never feel like you're locked into one library or something. And that goes for your own libraries as well. So right now, I think egui is a good bet for us because it runs web, it runs natively, and I have the flexibility to change it. And it supports the things I want. And if it doesn't, I just add the support for it. But yeah, time will tell. So far, I've been working egui on and off for, well, almost 3 years. I really started working on it a lot during the pandemic. It was my kind of pandemic project, right? So I put a lot of time into it. And now that I actually have my own company and going to be using it, I hopefully going to be able to put in more time into it. And so hopefully this is going to be a very exciting year for egui, but it's going to, change a lot and improve a lot. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to play. It seems really easy compared to other ones out there. So I think if I were, like you said, if I were to slap together like a GUI for some Rust thing I created, I think that would be on my list. I'm also quite attracted to, was it TUI or something like that? Not Tori, but like TUI. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
That's more console-based one, but that's still quite attractive what you can do with it.
Yeah. It's like a terminal UI. I think that's what it stands for.
Is that what the T stands for? That makes sense. I feel like a complete dummy right now, but that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I love that approach as well. Like minimalistic UIs is so much nicer than just, CLI. Anything you can click is an improvement, I think.
Yeah, I just think that if I try to give this to a client, they wouldn't be very happy because it's not super attractive and you can't do like very interesting UIs like you said. But I think, if you're not picky, it's totally fine. And I think I like how small the code can be. So yeah, that's definitely quite interesting. And I like that you interface with a lot of different other ones too. You have a whole bunch of other places that you can interact with, right? Like Godot, like basically all like the big ones, right? Godot, Bevy. Yeah, I mean, you hit up a lot of stuff. What is the other one I think I saw in here? I think there's also GTK in here or something too, I thought. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, I think so. GDZ, STL2, WebGPU, Ash, Volcano, like all those rendering libraries as well. Yeah, all the all the game engines, Miniquad, MacroQuad. It's also really nice minimalistic game engines. Yeah, that's the thing. Like egui is built to be easy to integrate into other game engines or to any platform, basically. So that's why it's been very popular in so many game engines. And so if you follow Rust game dev, you see a lot of people using egui for especially like dev tools in their games. But some games are actually using egui for their GUI as well, like the players facing GUI with modified visuals, with their custom theming and so on. And it can be made to look really good. And as for the layout things, you can actually use egui as well by manually placing things. You can place things, put the button here, like on this particular pixel coordinate and this particular size and so on, which means if you really want full control over the layout, you can just do the layout manually yourself and just make it as pretty as you want. So immediate mode can actually be like a layer underneath another, or a reactive or a retained mode paradigm as well, if you want to.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, no, I just have to play. I got to find time to play. It's on my list, never-ending list of things to play with.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think I'm not the only one. Yeah, is there anything else? Like, is there something that's coming up near for the timeline of egui in terms of new features coming out or anything like that?
Well, we just released 0.17. One of the things I'm working on right now is to easily integrate 3D visualization into the egui framework. So the egui framework is called eFrame. So that's like a framework for putting egui into your web browser or into your desktop app and so on. So I'm working now on to make it very easy to integrate your own 3D visualizations into that. That's been an often requested feature, but more importantly, I need it now for my company. So that's why I'm working on that. Beyond that, I hopefully be able to work on multipass GUI sometime this spring. But that's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but just haven't been finding the time to do. But that would really create very much nicer layouting in egui, which I think would be a game changer to make it more feeling less janky, feel more robust, and just make it look much nicer. So I really hope to be able to get to that this spring. But otherwise, just follow me on Twitter at Ernerfeldt. Oh my God, yeah, that's the worst Twitter handle I just realized for a podcast because my surname is impossible to spell. But yeah, just go to egui.rs and click to my GitHub, and then you'll find my Twitter handle there. I think that's the best place to follow me.
Okay. Yeah, we can see if we can pop your Twitter handle in and maybe just drop it to me after the show and I'll put it into the notes.
Yeah, well, that's probably where I'm going to spend. There's also an egui Discord that's linked from the GitHub where I hang out sometimes and you can talk about egui and so on.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we sign off?
No, thank you for this interview. It was really, really fun.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out and saying, hey, you never reached out to me.
Yeah. I need to pay more attention to Reddit messages, apparently.
For my Reddit, I have one unread message that I cannot find. I literally checked every single conversation, and I still have one unread message somewhere, and I have no idea why still.
I'm glad this happened. I'm actually extremely disorganized person, so like I'll forget about an email all the time as well because I'm not that kind of person. I'm a good programmer and basically nothing else. So I'm really happy that we managed to get this together. And thank you for doing the podcast. Keep doing it.
I'll try. It's getting tough sometimes, right? Like for your podcast, I apologize. I'm not as organized as I am for most others. Not all of them, but most others. And I'm happy that you could make it on. And yeah, if there's anybody else who wants to come on, I'm definitely open. Just let me know, and I'll drop you the schedule link. You can come on, and maybe it would be kind of interesting to have like a roundtable. I think of all the GUI people out there, Slint, egui, maybe more of the pure Rust ones rather than like the Dear I'm GUI, and just kind of like talk about like, okay, this is how mine works, and this is why I think this is better. This is why, or in these situations it's better, and then like kind of exchange ideas, right? I mean, there must be some commonality there somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Sure. I think of all the pure Rust libraries, I think Iced is the biggest one. So you should probably reach out to them.
Yeah, I definitely will. I didn't even know about ice until now, I think, actually, until you told me about it. Okay. Yep, I have a standing desk. I know it's just distracting, right? Been sitting for like 8 hours, so I had to stand up for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, thanks for coming on. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate, we got a rough start in the beginning because of mic issues, but I'm happy that we sorted it all out. So
yeah, sorry about that. Sorry for making it run late because of bad mic. I hope you can get home and get some sleep tonight. Is it late now?
Yeah, it's about 10:30 over here, but not too bad. So, all right. Thanks for stopping by, and maybe I'll have you back when we hear about your dog food experience and how maybe you switched from dog food to people food after that. I don't know.
Fair enough. Nice seeing you. Take care.
Okay, thank you.